We're going live. Folks, this is office hours. So yeah, feel free to ask us questions. My name is Sohan Maheshwar. I work for AWS and I'm joined with David and Marta. Welcome to the show, guys.
How's it, man? Great to be here.
Hey, Sohan, nice to be here.
Well, folks, we're keeping this online stream running, and this is office hours. So what that means essentially is if you have any questions about AWS or about any of the talks that just happened, feel free to put it in the chat. David and Marta will answer them for you. Until then, we are going to talk about all things AWS. Well, Marta, I'm coming to you first. Any cool AWS project you've been working on recently?
Well, not really, but I think looking at David's talk, that's something I really should look into.
Yeah.
It was so much fun.
Yeah.
Awesome. Some AR stuff, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
So, folks, if you want Werner Vogel's in your weekly stand-up, you know whom to contact. So, David, tell us more about all of this. How did you actually think about doing something like this?
Sure, man. I don't know. I mean, I just like the kind of, I think the AR stuff was cool, but there's so many cool things that I've been playing with. Like it's even like the quantum stuff. I sometimes feel like a sorcerer or something, able to spin up a quantum computer and be like, play with the fabric and magic of the universe, right? It's such a cool experience. And as a kid, I always dreamed of being able to play with these things that was like, it seemed imaginary, like Star Trek, right? Teleportation, that'll never happen. And now it's like, maybe there'll be a AWS cloud service one day that lets me just spin that up and do it. So it's pretty cool, just like a whole bunch of kids' ideas to actually try to see if I can build them. I don't know about yourself, if you have any like kinds of kids' ideas like that as well. Anything?
Yeah, probably. I think I saw some project about somebody sorting Lego with machine learning, right? So sorting the Lego pieces, that's also a nice idea.
I think I would try to build those Lego pieces, use a machine learning model or robot to like build those things out or something like that, like using RoboMaker. There's so many cool things. I just feel like I can keep trying. Like I've even been playing with like Data Wrangler a lot, and this is like one of those things. It's such a cool service for being able to like ship your data and stuff like that with like one-line commands. So yeah, so many things to play with, so little time.
How far do you think we're from this possibility where you can put yourself into a Netflix movie, for instance?
That's a good question.
Actually, if any of y'all steal that idea, I have lawyers. No, I'm kidding.
I actually don't think it would be that hard. I mean, Netflix are the kings at this, right? If you could just add a video of yourself pulling some funny faces and then see yourself, like that Bear Grylls thing where it was like, you
choose your own adventure.
Choose your thing. I'd like to do that, like fall off cliff and then it's like yourself falling off the cliff, right? Maybe we would make it so much more real or something like that. And I don't think it would be that hard. I mean, Snapchat's already doing what I showed in that with like kind of with filters a little bit. They're kind of already doing that. And I think that's what I was really trying to show as well, is like the models have moved in a way where it's getting smaller, more understanding and easier to do this stuff without having some massive GPU behind you or something. So I feel like we should be seeing it really soon, and
yeah,
honestly, the small things you see, like for example in Amazon Prime, when you in Prime Video, when you pause the video, you see actually who's in the picture already, like the metadata about the actors and those kind of things. That's really cool.
Yeah. And honestly, so the way Netflix looks at video is it's not a typical .avi or whatever file, right? They look at it programmatically as a bunch of different frames. So for instance, if there's this new Marvel movie and some monsters destroying a city, based on where you're watching, like you're watching this from Amsterdam, they can show Amsterdam being destroyed theoretically. And if I'm watching it, say from London, they can show like London being destroyed in the movie. So I think we're not too far away from something like that, where, programmatically you're customizing what people are watching based on something.
That's scary. That sounds really cool though. I mean, like, honestly, like, I think maybe if you want to hear a cool one as well is like, so with quantum computing, there was some guy who came out recently from AWS who figured out how to make truly random numbers with quantum computers. Yes. You could also use that in so many things, I mean, like not just encryption, but with video game designing of maps and levels and stuff like that. So like you said, who knows, you could even maybe theoretically start generating movies and stuff like that for people that, oh man, that would be such a cool world. Like just go watch Netflix and be like, no, I actually want to watch something that's funny and maybe set in South Africa, and it just like generates this whole video with me in it. That would be cool.
So this is like QuickSight Q, where you can say, "Oh, QuickSight, generate me a video with me in Netflix."
Yeah, chat based. Yeah. So, folks, this is Office Hours. Feel free to ask us any questions about AWS, and we'll try and answer them. We have a question from Ivika. So, Ivika, first off, great performance in the quiz. Still 4 more rounds to go, though. So keep at it. Okay, here's the question. Any advice for a company thinking about giving devs the ability to provision their infra with whatever infra as code tool they choose, requiring certain tags and respecting naming schemas on an organization level is a must, but what else? Marta, we were talking earlier about infrastructures as code and doing it at scale. Do you have any tips for this? And then David, we'll come to you.
Well, tagging, I guess you can use tagging policies in AWS organizations to force that somehow. Only it doesn't allow you to, let's say, require that a tag is there. You can only say it needs to follow a certain standard. Yeah, so respecting a naming scheme, I think that's quite hard, because if you, let's say, use the dynamically generated names from CDK or CloudFormation, then that's hardly possible to do. And I don't think we try to move from pets to cattle, right? So I don't really think the naming should be that much of an issue, unless you can recognize it by some metadata that's on the tags or something like that. Yeah.
Tagging is, I think, one of those super underrated things that I'm lazy. Okay, I'm really lazy, and sometimes I'm tagging, I don't need it, and then it comes back to haunt me always. So yes, tagging for sure. David, anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm probably a bad developer like Sohan. We're not as, Martin's probably a lot more like strict with his like enterprise level coding and stuff. I'm like, even when I was doing that deepfake stuff, I'm like EC2 instance, I'm like deepfake 1, deepfake 2, deepfake 3, like the worst tagging names. I mean,
ABC 1, 2, 3,
yeah, this question as well is so hard, right? It's like naming things is easy, right? It's like that whole scary thing in computing of naming stuff and schemas. And I found the best, though, to do a lot with this stuff is, this obviously speaks a lot to like cloud operating models and business meeting technical and kind of talking around like your organization and what they're actually trying to achieve when it comes to naming stuff and tagging stuff. Because you might want to just tag stuff for like good cost insights and things like that. And then from infra as a code kind of perspective, I believe we should all be using whatever is the easiest and everything like serverless, SAM, Terraform. I personally love AWS SAM. I don't know why we have to make life so much harder, but like that thing is amazing for lambdas and stuff like that. So
I think another suggestion could be to use, like, before you deploy it, right? There's linting tools available that can lint CloudFormation code, and even if you use CDK, which ends up being generated in CDK or in CloudFormation templates, you could scan those templates based on the schema that's available already. So I think with CFN lint, it's pretty easy to do. Not sure how it's done with CFN guard nowadays, but I guess it's possible.
So let's talk a little bit about naming, because Ivika, I think this is a very interesting question. Martin, you work in enterprises, right? Are there any like rules you have or best practices when it comes to naming?
Well, I guess keep it simple. Don't require 20 tags or something. Yeah. What you normally see is, okay, what environment is this? What's the service team or the team owning the resource? And maybe what's the cost center? And then you could probably use a few more tags depending on, let's say, what is the criticality of the application. And you could do that basically to implement other controls around that. For example, if a resource has a high security classification, it needs to always be encrypted, for example, those kind of checks. And you could base that on the tag values. Yeah,
that's interesting. All right, Ivika, hope that answered your question. Again, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to hit us up in the chat. Actually, we do have a follow-up from Ivika_K. VCS is a good tag that points to a repo from which the resource was created. Super useful with infra as code. Yeah, good tip. Folks, this is Office Hours. If you have any questions about AWS, feel free to hit us up and we will try and answer them. We are here till 6:50. Yeah, and we'll keep it going. Okay, David, I have to ask you, you're a long-time AWS user. Am I correct?
Long-time
AWS user?
Yes, of course.
What was the first AWS service you used? And folks, in the comments, let me know what was the first AWS service you used as well.
Man, that's a good question, actually. I was actually kind of quite lucky now that I think about it. I guess like the stuff I got really deep into first was I was working with a lot of startups. So we it was actually like Lambda and stuff like that. So I was really able to get my like teeth into some of the I guess newer services, and like more bleeding edge, right? So it was like, okay, cool. How do we set up stuff super quickly for a startup in like a month, end to end APIs and database stuff, everything kind of sorted. And Lambda was amazing for that because so startups operationally don't have anyone to like run the stuff. So it's a little bit easier. But yeah, that was like some of the first stuff that I really got into. And I really was then like dive deep into like, okay, cool. There's this complexity around dynamic and your kind of strongly typed languages or compiled languages and stuff like that. And that was also cool because like at the time in my career, I was like, okay, cool. Now I get to like figure out what the difference of these things are, right? So there was also back then, there was no ORM for Lambda. So I started helping out with this type ORM, which is like, I think used by everyone now on Lambda. It's like a JavaScript, TypeScript Lambda thing, but that was pretty fun too. So Lambda was a great kind of entry into learning AWS stuff, like specifically serverless stuff as well, and like no ops, right? Is how they say that a lot. But yeah.
Yep. I can agree as well. A lot of my early AWS work was on Lambda. Ivika says console. I don't think that counts, Ivika, but good answer. Folks in the chat, yes, let us know what your first AWS service was. We'd love to hear from you. Marta, what about you?
I actually come from a totally different background, so more infrastructure related. So I think one of the first projects I done on AWS was, I think we were trying to build some kind of managed Puppet service. So then we were looking for a PostgreSQL managed database. And I think really early on, they already was available in RDS when it wasn't available on the other platforms. So I think that was one of the first things that I used. And mainly because if you try to set up like PostgreSQL in a highly available setup manually yourself, that's quite complex. And with RDS, it's just like, okay, make it multi-availability zone and you're done, right? So yeah, that was, I think from that point on, it was really like, oh, this is really cool. And then started all the Cloud Guru stuff and moved on from there and moved to all the to the other services. Yeah. What about you?
So at a company I worked for in 2011, I just got introduced to like EC2, right? And back then we were still trying to like wrap our heads around like, wait, this is not like private, like local, but in the cloud, like how does that work? But again, like a lot of the senior engineers were doing it. I think the one that I really did a dive deep on was Lambda. Right? So like you, David, started working on Lambda, started figuring out, okay, this is like way too cool. And, there's so many cool things you can do. So yeah, I typically say Lambda if people ask me that question.
But that must have been EC2 Classic still, right? Then.
Yes, it was. So it wasn't as easy. Yeah. It was a lot difficult. And
so all ephemeral instances.
Yes, all ephemeral instances. Yeah, very different from what we're used to right now.
Yeah.
I mean, even I remember having a chat with like this one senior that I was working with, and I showed him some code, and it's basically spun up an EC2 instance, did some work, and then like deleted itself when it was finished doing the work. And he looked at the piece of code, and he had never like really touched AWS that much. And he's like, if you show this to a lot of guys, they're not going to understand it, right? So even with simple things like EC2 and stuff, or seemingly simple things, you can write absolutely complicated stuff. I mean, to tell you like a really ridiculous story, so do not try this at home, but I once even tried to like spin up Spot Kubernetes clusters. Like this Kubernetes cluster would like spawn, do all of this work, and then like turn off. I thought it would be a good idea, but quickly realized like that's just madness. But yeah.
How did the bill turn out after that?
Well, I mean, it's Spot, right?
Oh,
so
it's Spot, okay, okay.
so, but that was the idea at hand. Was like, hey, no, it would just be this engine. I could turn it on. It would do all of this processing, suck everything up that it needed to suck up, and then just turn itself off. And in code wise, you look at it and it's like 50 or 100 lines. You're like, this is actually pretty sweet. But in reality, it's like, okay, cool. To show that to another person and actually hand it over, like for them to understand what's going on there, it's like quite crazy. But yeah, so just to kind of give it a thing of, I don't know if Lambda or EC2, they both compute, but they definitely, yeah, I mean, they solve similar problems. And like that was what really interested me, like me in it, was like this whole like, okay, cool, Lambda is this compute that spawns up really quickly and then turns off. And EC2 is this like kind of compute as well that you sit there and like wrap and massage a little bit. But yeah.
But still, if you think about it, that you always see at the re:Invent presentations how little of enterprise workloads is already in AWS, then the EC2 will still be there for a long time, I guess.
It's going to be there for a long time.
Yeah.
Right?
It's the cornerstone of Kubernetes,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's just like auto-scaling groups with EC2s, and you have Kubernetes. So I imagine it will be there for a really long time. I mean, I think, yeah, they're great at, that's what's so cool is like the ops side. You know, like AWS is really brilliant at automating all of that ops away. That's been really tricky for people to kind of figure out now, because traditionally it was the ops guys who are playing with the machines. You know, now we are the devs sitting there automating the heck out of all of this stuff, and they're like, what are you doing? This is madness, spawning up a Kubernetes cluster.
Yeah, you see, for example, like that new NetApp service that now is available on FSX, for example. Those kind of enterprise-y features, I think you will see them more and more. And yeah, definitely useful for companies out there that are still not using AWS, because they probably should be considering it by now. So
I heard this guy say it, like AWS is really good at solving the problem. That's what sucks so much about them, which was interesting. I was like, huh? Because he's like, you know, because with AWS, like they'll completely solve the problem for you. It'll never be a problem anymore. But like Google, they'll make Kubernetes. So that creates jobs, if you think about it, because like a whole bunch of people need to learn how to use Kubernetes now and stuff like that. But yeah, if your problems are just being solved, it's like, yeah, well, you have no problems. It's kind of sweet.
So since we're talking on that subject, I recently had this very passionate debate at work about when not to use serverless, right? When you'd say, okay, I'm still going to go for like an EC2. You know? Have you come across in your workplace where you're like, okay, maybe for this use case, serverless isn't my best option. I'm just going like EC2 spin up instances.
As a short little thing, what I know is that basically what I heard was it doesn't make sense from a computing point of view to like do anything that is blocks, right? So like when you do disk writes, it's like idle time and stuff like that. That's blocking operations. And theoretically, you're paying for those blocking operations on Lambda. So it makes no sense to pay for stuff that would do that. But honestly, there's so many things, right? I mean, that's the thing with programming. You can solve the same problem with every single tool that exists on AWS. It'll definitely solve it, but will it be the best? So I think that's really the cool part, working with people to understand those things.
Yeah, I think it's also about maturity in the teams, right? I mean, first, if you have never used Git or any done any coding before, then might not be the best idea to move straight to serverless in the cloud, right? Might be the first step might be to, I don't know, get started with some CloudFormation to deploy your EC2 instance, and let's see, move that old Java application over or something like that. And from there, maybe take some steps into containers and from there move on. Or yeah, it could be also, it really depends, I think, about company culture, how the people can absorb knowledge, and how's the coaching and those kind of things. So yeah, that might be a super good use case for serverless, but if your people don't understand what they're doing, then it won't help.
That's actually just a good thing, is that so like recently AWS launched container images, which makes it so much easier. So if you just know Docker, now you can write your Lambdas, which is helpful. And so you can basically create your own container images with the container runtime environment stuff. So you can then write your Lambdas on your computer, create a Docker of it, curl your container, it works, and then send it to the cloud. So that's also, compared to when I first played with Lambda, you were sitting there like writing these super weird things to try to figure out to test your Lambdas even. But now it's like way easier to test locally. It's also like, yeah, that helps a lot. I guess that would make a lot more people kind of adapt to using it and stuff like that. But sometimes I think the trickiest things with these tools are like the permissions, like IAM always will get you.
Always.
Right? It's like
the A in IAM stands for always. No.
Yeah, you're always like, oh, this thing's not working, it sucks. And then you're like, oh, CloudWatch logs, I didn't have that enabled as a permission. That's why it wasn't running, and that catches me off guard as well all the time. So it's
getting better, I think, because I think the new feature that was released lately, where you could actually see which policy type is causing your access denied, for example, if it's caused by a service control policy in organizations, that already really helps to troubleshoot those kind of issues, right? So, this is blocked on organization level, then I don't have done anything wrong in my own setup, then yeah, much easier to find.
I think that is probably the most useful service in terms of employee productivity, because I've spent so much time sitting there like access denied in an S3 bucket, and then you're like, oh, it's the KMS key. I don't have that one or something, right? Yeah, no, that would be massively, because that's the thing. You also realize you have like your guys who are building stuff on the one side of the fence, and then the guys who are maybe maintaining the platform. And that you can't always see like how they've changed the permissions and stuff. So yeah, that's a really awesome one. I need to check that out a bit.
Yeah, it is. Folks, this is Office Hours. We are here till 6:50 local time. And essentially, the idea is you get to ask us questions. So if you have any questions about AWS, hit us up in chat while our in-person participants have dinner, and we'll try and answer them. I have David and Marta here for 7 more minutes. So we're going to ask them a few questions again. Big question, where do you really see cloud computing going in the next 2 years and then maybe in the next 5 years? And David, I know you think about this a lot, so I'll go with you first. And then Marta, I'll go with you next.
That's someone was saying, oh no, I read in the newspaper, it was like 2025 is going to be like a solar storm or something, and it's going to kill the internet. And I was like, no!
Wait, how will I watch my Netflix and my YouTube?
No, but I was like, I'm a cloud engineer. My job, I need the internet. It's the one thing you can't take away. Sure. I mean, I think there's probably a lot more AR moving on the cloud and stuff like that. Most of these data centers are still on-prem. It's like the usual stuff. I'm hoping that one day lots of enterprises realize that it's actually cheaper to just take all of that money and build a new thing than actually trying to like go through the weird refactor pain that they normally go through and stuff. And then they 3 years later don't really have anything, because if they just started new, like maybe in 3 months or 6 months, they could have something, and it's probably really good for their company. But I think that to me maybe is a more cultural thing that you'll see more. So you'll see a lot more of these smaller companies popping up that are good at handling these niche kind of technical challenges. And maybe the enterprises, I think enterprises should be a little bit afraid, actually, because like you look at these companies like Picnic in Netherlands, they like just spawn up instantly. They pump out their whole architecture and system in under a year, and then they start gathering subscribers through the whole of Netherlands. Your other company retailers need to like fight these people. And this is traditionally, well, not fight, but this is traditionally the problem that like these big enterprises have versus these smaller guys. So I think cloud is definitely here to stay, and it's massively enables people to actually get their products into production. And that is huge. That is it.
Yeah, absolutely. Marta, on that note, based on what David said, you work with a lot of enterprises and large customers, right? Do you think they are becoming more agile, becoming more tech focused to compete with startups and really stay relevant now?
I think in every engagement, you see that's becoming a requirement, moving to DevOps kind of way of working, agile being there. So I think eventually we'll get there. Yeah.
I mean, we've gone from a lot of big companies saying 5 years ago, we don't need a mobile website or we don't need a mobile app, to this, right? Where everyone's on serverless and DevOps.
If you're not there, then probably somebody in the marketing department will pull their credit card and open up an Amazon account. So, that will happen anyhow.
Yeah.
But to continue on what will happen, I think one of the things is what you see is, I think, more like these specific industry vertical services, like, for example, Comprehend Medical or Panorama, those kind of really services built upon multiple AWS services combined, I guess, specifically tailored to a specific industry. I think more and more of those will pop up.
That's
also,
a good one. That's a really good one.
Yeah. And I think you also see a lot more moving towards the edge, right? With outposts, local zones, wavelength, those kind of things are rapidly growing, I think. Yeah, because there's still lots of factories and manufacturing sites that need compute on site, right? Because speed of light is still not fast enough. So, yeah.
Only a matter of time, David?
Yeah, I think so, actually. I saw AMD did a patent for quantum teleportation, and then NVIDIA was like, we think we might buy AMD. So, yeah, so probably. But that was really great points. I really liked what you said there. I mean, I think that is really a big thing with AWS, of how they meet with their customers, understand this like product that actually could be a real product in the space, and then start developing it. And the cool thing is then you can just give it to them to like manage, right? It's like Comprehend Medical
you
or
have
something.
Also, what is it? FinSpace is called, right? The new the service for the financial services industry, data lakes. So yeah, there's a lot of examples, I think, already available at the moment.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you, Marta. Thank you, David, so much.
Thank you,
folks, we're keeping office hours going for the next 20 minutes until we go back live from Arnhem. I'll let David and I'll let Marta have the dinners, and I'm going to pull in Rode and Pete from Arnhem. So I'm just going to do a quick switch here. All right, there we go.
Hey, hello from Arnhem.
Hello from Arnhem.
Okay, hopefully my audio is coming through clearly, Pete and Rhoda, and folks in the chat as well. Okay, that's good.
Can you hear us as well, Sohan? No.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
All right, folks, welcome to Office Hours. I'm just going to figure the audio out here. But yeah, let's get talking. Pete, any cool AWS things that you've been working on lately?
Well, I was wondering what the Echo Machine service was you were using right now, but we can talk about it later. Sorry, what was the question? I was distracted.
What cool projects have you been working on?
Well, the two coolest projects that I can talk about and that were cool, in my opinion, were two internal projects, because one of the things we want to do, we have been trying to do for a few years, is being more cloud proficient as a company, and try to help our partners become more cloud efficient. And what we see is that it's getting people motivated to get certified, for example, is one way to do that. But that only gets you so much cloud proficiency. So what we did was we developed two apps internally. One we called the Cloud Proficiency app, where people can define what they think a developer or maybe a salesperson or a manager or a team lead should be able to do in the cloud, or should know about the cloud. So this is information. And the other thing we try to do is get people motivated to work on their cloud skills. So we created a Cloud the Game app, and it's not too serious, but it's an app where you can enter the things you did to get more cloud proficient. For example, you read a blog, or you went to this event, or you created a vlog, for example. And salespeople can join too, and they do. For example, if they have had a talk with a client about cloud, then they can enter that. It's really simple, the input, but the output is so much fun, because we use the output for doing internal competition. So we, in the beginning of this year, we did a competition amongst individuals where people were pitted against each other in a sort of draw. And if you got the most points compared to your opponent, then you proceed to the next round. In the meanwhile, I'm trying to look at the application. And that was really cool. because
it seems like you do a lot of quiz stuff, Pete.
Yeah,
like,
that was really cool.
Nice. Rode, first of all, thanks for joining today. Have you been working on anything cool AWS related?
Yes. I'm very interested in blockchain. That's why I'm currently researching how blockchain and AWS go together. So blockchain and cloud, the combination is, I think, very interesting. What are the benefits, the downsides, and how does it work at all? So, of course, my favorite is Amazon managed blockchain. I try to figure out how it works, sometimes I listen to you. I ask some questions to you, Sohan, because you also have some experience with Amazon managed blockchain.
I have, yes.
Yes, but still, I did not try the Ethereum part yet. So I only figured out some part of the Hyperledger blockchain on AWS. But I really, really want to figure out how the Ethereum part works.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ethereum is in the news quite often these days for the cryptocurrency part, but I think there's so much more you can actually do on Ethereum. And for people who are following the news about things like NFTs, non-fungible tokens, most of it's actually built on Ethereum. So yeah, for folks interested, do check out Amazon managed blockchain. Pete, Rode, so I asked Marta and David this question as well, and folks in the crowd too, feel free to chime in chat. But what was the first AWS service you used? And Pete, I'll start with you.
The first service I used, I think, was Lambda. Was it right after the announcement, I think? The general, I don't know which one. But
2014, I think?
Yeah, and because that really pulled me into the cloud space. Before that, I was a Java engineer. I was mainly building either monoliths or microservices. But this next evolution really struck me, and that's what I tried out Lambda. So I think that's the first one I used. I was really awestruck by it. Really cool.
Yep.
I still use it a lot.
Yep. Absolutely, yeah. And I think serverless is going from strength to strength these days, right? It's not like people like, oh, I'm not going to use serverless. I think more people and more companies and businesses are adopting serverless. So yeah. Rode, what about you? What was the first AWS service that you used?
Yes, I heard some of the answers, and most of the were Lambda, but that's not for me. I thought it would be useful to combine learning theory with practicing for the certificate. So I don't have one service I used first. So I was just playing around for the certificate with Beanstalk, IAM, EC2, Lambda, and S3, but not one in particular.
Yep. All the core foundational services of AWS.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So while we're on the topic, this is a question that I get asked very often. So I think I'll ask this question to the two of y'all as well, since you spoke about it, Rode. But do you have any tips on actually passing or studying for an AWS certification? You know, what helped you out? What information pieces you used and things like that?
For me, it's really combine the theory and practicing, and also practice the exams, actually. So maybe that's not the answer you want to hear, but I really do recommend that, because you have to recognize what kind of questions they will ask. And you have to get a little used to these kind of questions.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, because that's what I tell everyone as well, to actually do the practice exams in practice conditions. You know, a lot of people, including myself, will do a practice exam and I'm streaming, like, I don't know, YouTube on the side or something, but you want to be in that frame of mind where how you would in an exam. So yeah, Pete, any advice for people writing the certification?
Yeah, well, it depends on the way you learn. I'm super lazy, so what I did first was do a lot of practice, just aimless practice, and then for the practitioner exam, I did one weekend of John Bonzo practice exams on Udemy and Stefan Marek's video course at 2 speed or something. So I don't know what he sounds like in real time, and that worked for me. But the practice was key, I think, because then I had a frame in which I could put the information for the exams.
Nice. Yeah, a lot of people have recommended Stefan Marek's course on, I think it's Udemy. So for folks studying for any certification, especially the solution architect certification, I highly recommend that course as well. Has some great reviews. A lot of people worldwide actually use it. Folks, we're here for about 10 more minutes before we move back to our live sessions. Hope you have enjoyed our dinner. This is office hours, so feel free to ask us questions. And if you don't get any questions, we're just going to talk about AWS till the sessions begin. So yeah, keep those questions coming. All right, Rode, Pete, I've asked this question to Marta and David as well, but as a company like Luminous, you all work with a lot of businesses to make them cloud first and to get them onto the cloud. Do you see that trend changing a lot with some of the older companies who are really sort of adopting, getting on the cloud, being more agile, adopting DevOps and things like that?
Yes, slowly but surely. Oftentimes people need to take a decision on keeping a data center alive for a few more years or reinvesting in the hardware. That's where we get some clients. And also once we convince clients of not the cost, but the benefit part of the equation of the cloud, and especially if we do cool serverless demos, that's where you see a cloud getting adopted, but then it's often for example, an enterprise in a small corner of the enterprise, and then from there it builds up to the rest. But you really need influential, creative people within such large companies to adopt.
Yeah. And do you see hybrid as a way to sort of bridge that gap between, being completely like local and data center to being completely all into the cloud?
Yeah, it depends, but sometimes, for example, I mostly work with large enterprises, but sometimes keeping a data center open for stuff that you need to support for a few more years while building newer stuff in the cloud works. But in my opinion, there's always some friction. So you need to at least have a strategy if you're going hybrid. It should not be a default choice you make. So if you really have made a very well-motivated choice to go hybrid, in my opinion, then it can work. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. And absolutely agree with you, Pete. I think moving to something like hybrid is something that you need to plan on. You need like a buy-in from your team. You need to build that plan out and then get into it. Cool. Okay, so I usually ask this to all my guests. I do run office hours on the AWS Twitch as well, and I always get a variety of responses, so I have to ask you all. Rode, you can go first. Which is your favorite AWS service and why? And you can pick only one.
Yeah, it's still the Amazon managed blockchain, because I really think it's so interesting. I like the blockchain part because that is quite complicated, and that AWS makes it possible. It's very nice because once I had the Ethereum blockchain on my own computer, but it kind of crashed because it was way too big for my computer. So it's very nice that AWS is handling the hardware part here. So yeah, I'm very happy with that one.
Nice. Good to see a blockchain enthusiast here. Pete, what about you?
Well, right now it's definitely Amplify, which Everton will talk about next. But I really love the two apps I mentioned we built with Amplify, and I already expected a lot because their marketing is top notch. But we really did a lot in just a few hours. I've never built something so quickly, and I've never built something that is so agile in its construct, because we can deploy changes within a few seconds. We can onboard people within a few minutes. I really like Amplify. I'm a big fan.
Mm-hmm. And would you say so? I also love Amplify, and I've used it a fair bit. And so, Pete, having used Amplify in like a live setting, would you say that the speed to develop something on Amplify is its biggest plus?
Yes, for me, the speed of developing in the cloud, so using the cloud to manage the things that are not part of your core business, that's the reason I'm a big proponent of the cloud. And Amplify just amplifies this philosophy. So speed is the main reason I often pick Amplify for projects. Even for clients that want to do something in the cloud, it's really convincing, and it's a good gateway to using more advanced services or doing more advanced stuff in the cloud. So yeah.
Yes, agree. For folks who haven't used Amplify, do check it out. Like Pete mentioned, great way to build mobile and web applications, supports multiple platforms, languages, and is compliant with and works with a whole bunch of cloud things as well. So yes, do check it out, and it's super easy to use. When people ask me my favorite AWS service, I always tell them, and I lie a little bit because I say Snowmobile, even though I've never used it. But the fact that it's this huge truck, I think, makes it automatically my favorite service. I must say Lambda, though. Yeah. Apart from Snowmobile, if I have to choose, I must say Lambda because I think it's super cool. And I think we're still just scratching the surface of what we can do with serverless, And I think Lambda is at the very core of that. So, yeah. We have
and Lightsail.
Yeah, go ahead.
Lightsail is also quite promising, I think. I don't. I just think it's very nice for lots of businesses to have that one because they don't have to have a very big website or something. So it's very nice that they also have that service.
Yes, I agree. I think if you want something that takes your hands off a lot of things and say, hey, I just want my website managed by the service, I'll pay whatever few dollars a month. I think Lightsail is just amazing for that. It's really good for that.
Yes.
So especially if you're like a local business, you don't have this huge tech team, Lightsail is great.
Yeah. Yeah, so I like it that they also have something for the very, very small businesses. That's nice.
Yeah. Darko89 says, Pete in the house. Yes, Pete is in the house, and we're asking Pete and Rode questions. We have them for a couple of minutes, so I'm going to ask you all each a final question, which I also asked Marta and David. Where do you see cloud computing and AWS in the next 2 to 5 years? And Rode, you can go first.
Ooh, that's a difficult one. Please, can you repeat the question again?
Yes. So look into your crystal ball and tell me what you think. Yeah, what you think the future of AWS in the next 2 to 5 years is.
I think it will be big. I think almost any company is now changing to cloud, and most of them see that AWS is the biggest, and because it has, I think, how do you say it? When it's the longest, it has the longest existence, so it's quite betrouwbaar. I don't know the English word for it. Reliable. Yeah, it's quite reliable. So I think it will be really big. Sure.
Nice. Yeah. Pete, what do you think?
So for AWS itself, I think its ability to execute. That's the reason I'm such a big fan. So I only expect more growth and more adoption by a lot of clients, and I also see that this always leads to huge improvements. So that's why I'm always shouting from the rooftops for people to go to AWS, because then I know its services will be even better in the future. So growth and market share, and well, for me, I'm a huge fan of serverless, like I said, and I can't see beyond the horizon. But I think that if the scope is 2 to 5 years, then it's just more and more serverless and less of the rest. And I'm really curious about where serverless is heading. I think it's just in its infancy.
Yes, agree. Yep. All right, folks, it's 6:45, which means we are a few minutes away from the resumption of Community Day. And we're going for a session with Evertson, who's in Arnhem. So Pete, Rode, I'll hand the control back to you. And yeah, we can start in 5 minutes. Thanks again for your questions. Thanks for the comments. Keep them coming for the rest of today. And yeah, see you in a few minutes. Thanks, Rode. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, Sohan. Thanks, Rode.
Thank you. Bye.